Hello and welcome to Bad Music Hurts, the friendly music club podcast where my siblings and I discuss our favorite music. This is episode 15, and today we're talking about Grizzly Bear's third major LP, Shields, from 2012. I'm Marc Michael, and on the other end is my brother and world-renowned engineer extraordinaire, Michael Michael. Hey, Michael.
How's it going? I don't know about the world-renowned part, but engineer for sure. But yeah, glad to be here. It's been a while.
We've been trying to get this one going for a while, too. We've been kicking the can on this for a while, but I'm actually kind of happy we did because it's given me an opportunity to not just listen to it once through in preparation for the show like I typically kind of do, but like I think I've listened to this thing a total of 3 times before now, like with the anticipation that we're going to be talking about it on the show. So it's given me an opportunity to really kind of flesh out and solidify my feelings on it and particular things about the record that I really like, and also, unfortunately, the things that I really don't like. So I'm really glad that we've had a while to kind of ruminate and stew on this one. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I unfortunately procrastinated quite a bit. There was a lot going on, and that's kind of why we delayed a whole bunch of holidays and everything going on. So once the kind of this weekend turned around, I did listen to it a couple of times. I listened to a couple of the other albums as well to try to gain context again, back to the band and kind of their sound. Shields, I would say, has been the one I've listened to the most of them. But yeah, I did enjoy kind of last minute cramming my my listening. But it was fun last night and middle of the day today to kind of revisit this, because I kind of knew in my head, postponing it, I kind of was already formulating my thoughts. It just was nice to listen to it again and kind of dive into it and kind of solidify some stuff.
So let's actually kind of circle back to that. You mentioned before that Shields has been one of the ones that's been on your mind just for a while in terms of like Grizzly Bear's releases. Like what's your personal background with Shields and Grizzly Bear as a whole? Because I know my personal history with them, and I think I introduced them to you, but like I'm not really sure on the other side of the fence, like what your perspective up to this point with the band is, and you know what your initial thoughts on Shields were and all that.
Yeah, so yeah, I got the band sent to me by you. I can't remember which came first, if it was Yellow House or Shields, to be honest. Do you remember which one you sent first?
No, I remember discovering Yellow House and liking Yellow House first, but whether or not I bought Yellow House or Shields first, and even whichever one I shared with you first, I'm not entirely sure, unfortunately.
Yeah, so I would say my memory, Shields stands out the most. I remember listening to both, but Shields was the one I always came back to. So this is around later high school, early college years. The album has a very, I guess, kind of late fall, early winter feel to it. And that's kind of how I remember initially listening to it as well. It was around, like, I think Thanksgiving, I really started listening to it a lot the year that we found them.
That's fascinating to me, actually, because I have the exact opposite feeling in terms of like what kind of season I associate to Shields. For Shields, for me, it's more of like spring, maybe like peak summer days sort of feeling. That's interesting.
That's interesting. Yeah, no, I'm the exact opposite. I associate it strongly with around like hunting season, fall, winter, those sort of times. That's just when I listen to it a lot. And that's just what my memory kind of calls back to when I think about this album. But I guess in terms of like, I think you asked about first thoughts as well, right? For me, listening back to Yellow House and Shields, in my opinion, Shields is where I think Grizzly Bear does it right. I think their formula works the best. And I also think this is where they get their most, I think, mass market appeal. I think this is like the best curated album they have. The best pacing. Listening back to Yellow House in this compared, it kind of reinforced kind of why I didn't listen to Yellow House a whole bunch and gravitated more towards Shields. I always am brought back to it because I always think about the instrumentals first and the lyrics kind of come second. That's what draws me to albums, and the instrumentals of Shields always kept me going back. And those instrumentals is kind of where I get that sense of season. It just kind of has always kind of an underbelly of just melancholy, kind of just, it kind of has a sad feeling to it, I guess, to put it quite simply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Oh man, I agree with a lot of the things you said, and then some I can't quite agree with. So it's interesting where we differ on this. I would definitely agree that this is by far their most accessible and commercial record to date. And I do not mean that in like a derogatory way or like a dismissive way. I think it is a tremendously fantastic record and is as good as it is because of how approachable the songs on here, or the majority of songs are on here, where it manages to meld that core Grizzly Bear energy that's very hard to grasp and is more like ethereal in like its purest form in Yellow House, and was somewhat wrangled a little bit on Vecatimus, but I think is really given a more approachable delivery vessel on Shields, and I think to its benefit. We'll get to this later, but I think, like, for example, Yet Again is Grizzly Bear's best single. It could be, you could hear maybe in a bar somewhere, or like even while you're shopping, or like just on the radio, wherever you're driving, and it can meld perfectly in with other hits of that time, or even like today, I would say, but still has that core Grizzly Bear energy, whereas other bands, when they get more approachable, sometimes lose what made them special in the first place. And I don't get that at all here. It still is Grizzly Bear, but as I said, like the delivery vessel is just rock solid for this. It's very easy to digest, and there's more there for you to dive into if you want, or if you return to it. So
I 100% agree on what you're saying here. That was one of the notes I had called out here, is that they stay truthful to what I think are the good things in Yellow House and kind of their foundations. The vocal harmonies are on point. That it still stays true to some of the tonal feel. But I think what they do better here is they start embellishing more of the instrumentals, where this is where I think Yellow House really fell flat. Is ultimately Yellow House wasn't very engaging for me instrumentally. A lot of the songs were very kind of doldrum, and it just, for lack of a better word, some of them I described as insufferable edge-roastness, where it just was, it got to be too much of kind of I labeled it as almost borderline mumble folk, or mumble psychedelic rock, where you couldn't even really hear what they were saying. And I just thought the mixing and production was bad, but there was something there. The vocal duality between Drost and Rosen, and the vocal harmonies, and kind of the psychedelic kind of tonal feel of it. Like there was something of intrigue there, such as with the songs of like Knife in Yellow House, as well as Easier, where you kind of have this, like, the beginning of Easier kind of has this uneasy feeling to it, but it kind of grabs you. But then I don't think they really carry that energy through. Whereas in Shields, they lean more into the instrumentals, they actually start driving more, get better mixing and production. And I think that ends up really working well for them.
Mm-hmm. So this is where I disagree with you, I think most strongly, where I think you're saying instrumentals, and maybe that is what you mean. But to me, I think what Shields does so well is the songs themselves are songy songs. They're very easy to follow along with. They follow, like, for the most part, very known, accessible structures, where it's like the verse, chorus, a bridge, maybe, and then, maybe the chorus again, and call it a day. So it's very easy. They flow naturally. They finish naturally. Whereas, to your point, Yellow House is very ethereal, very loose. It's hard to sink your teeth into if you're new to that, and even if you're not new to songs of that nature. It takes many listens to really fully digest Yellow House, because the songs in them are very obtuse. The lyrics are almost non-existent. To your point, it's hard to even hear what they're saying the most of the time. I think that's intentional. I don't think they wanted the lyrics to be the focal point of Yellow House. Yellow House definitely was more instrumentals. In fact, too much instrumentals in some cases. They literally just kept layering sounds and music and instruments on top of one another to make these like uber lush soundscapes for these relatively light, brittle song structures to be laid over top. So like Yellow House had almost no song structures to them.
Yeah.
Vecatimus changed that. And I think Shields did even more so. Like, it was the next logical step to the groundwork that Vecatimus laid. So, and to me, Shields, it's to the detriment of the instrumentation in many places. In many places, the instrumentals just kind of just vanish. A simple answer is the one that comes to mind. There's just some really empty spaces in that song where it's at one point it's literally just the drums playing a kind of dirgy beat to it, and you wouldn't see that anywhere at Yellow House. There was always at least 5 different other things going on at any given point on Yellow House, and even Vegetamist for that regard. So I definitely disagree in terms of Shields having you can definitely say that it maybe has the most refined instrumentation. Maybe I could see that being argued, but to me, the instrumentation here is actually pretty bare in many places, particularly the pothole of the record, which I'm sure we'll get into. But
yeah, so I guess what I'm trying to get at is, yes, I agree with everything you're saying, and kind of one of the big comments I have here as well from listening through is in What's Wrong. I'm like, the trumpet. I'm like, where's more of that?
Yeah.
Give me more of that in this album, because I think that really played well with a lot of their sound, with their primarily the drums, the guitar, or the piano. Like, I liked the addition of the trumpet and what they did and What's Wrong. After hearing that, I'm like, where is more of this in this album? So I agree with you in terms of the lushness and the layering. I guess what I'm trying to get at when I say instrumentals, or I guess I should rephrase it as like instrumentation, so it's not confused with an instrumental piece without lyrics. Like, the instrumentation, I feel, is better driven and directed in Shields, where I feel like it's headed somewhere. I feel like it's driving towards something. It sucks me in.
I see. It's more purposeful.
Yeah, and because of that, I feel like you can get away with less. Where before with Yellow House, yes, there's more there, but like, I never felt like I was really going anywhere, so it just kind of felt a lot of it like it was like plink, plunk, plunk, and then you kind of had to sift around again, kind of the dreariness of some of the mumble delivery of stuff that just like I said, one of my notes, once it got to the end of Colorado and Yellow House, my biggest note is just ugh, and it on reprise for the love of God. Like, it just, I couldn't, that's where they lose me. The sounds can be there, but it wasn't driving me. It wasn't keeping me engaged. It just, like I said, to an extent, started to get insufferable, where Yellow House hits its giant pothole, in my opinion, with Plans and Marla, where I feel like they almost have to start digging themselves out of a big hole, like on a neck, on a spit, and then into Reprise. And I think they should just cut their losses at Reprise and end it. And that's another big thing, is I think the pacing is better done in Shields. Again, they drive the instrumentation, it sucks you in better, and they keep it up. Like, there's only a couple songs in here that I labeled as like more Yellow Housey songs, but they're better fit in with respect to everything else in the album, where it carries through. Those serve then as the breaks between the more songy songs, right? The ones that drive better in the instrumentation. And when I say like the ones that labeled as kind of like the Yellow Housey songs, I have down as The Hunt and What's Wrong were kind of the two Yellow Housey songs I kind of put on here. And the rest I thought were able to keep up the pace and keep us driving towards, where like the album finishes very quickly, where I feel like I have to kind of keep myself engaged and like focus myself on Yellow House, where Shields, it goes very easy.
Yeah,
I guess.
I 100% agree with majority of what you're saying, where yes, overall, I think Shields has world-class pacing. My only issue is that there is a very clear, glaring pothole in the record in terms, it's like a black hole of pacing. The pacing stops, it dies, basically. And that is the first disc, second half. And that is The Hunt, A Simple Answer, and What's Wrong, unfortunately. I think What's Wrong starts to try to revive it. I actually do like What's Wrong, but unfortunately its placement is bad. Its placement is bad. It's following to, in my opinion, clunkers. But to your point, the second half of this record flies. It flies so fast. There's other records that I listen to, even ones that I really love, where once I get to the halfway point, it's hard to keep my attention all the way through, and I'm kind of keeping track of what track I'm on, and kind of counting down the minutes. But here it just like it's a blink and it's gone because it's so engaging. It's so nice. It's like when you're binging a show and you look up at the clock, it's like, where did the last like 8 hours go?
Yeah.
Not that this is an 8-hour long record, but yes, I agree that overall the album flows very well.
Mm-hmm. Even the bookends, right?
Yes.
Take how they start the album and how they end the album compared compared to so like something like Yellow House or Easier. I think they start the album really well, where it's like, ooh, this is like new, interesting. This kind of has a weird psychedelic feel and edge to it. Like it kind of sucks you in. It's different. It's kind of odd and weird. And then again, like I said, by the end it gets to Colorado, and I just can't finish it. I just stop it.
As much as I love Yellow House, and I'm going to stand for Yellow House over here every time you knock on it, but I do agree that Colorado is my skip. I tend to either drift away or stop the record entirely when it gets to Colorado. It's that one is a slog.
But back to like Sleeping Ute, it's just the heavy, just precise chord progression that sucks you into that song. And then the more kind of like almost Journey epic stylization of Sun in Your Eyes to close out the album. Like, that's how you close out an album, in my opinion. Something that you get this cool epic feeling that this builds up into. I can't not think of this overlaid into like an anime opening of a character.
It's super dramatic.
Turning their head dramatically into the sun, and nothing's going to be the same. I'm never going back.
It is just incredibly dramatic. For
yes.
Sure.
It is, exactly. And that's what's great. Is like it creates this really cool theatrical image in my head, and it's very enjoyable. It's a very enjoyable closer. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that as well. The pacing, I think, is very well done, and then also gets the bookends done right, in my opinion.
Yeah. So at this point, I think we've kind of set the stage for Shields pretty well in terms of overall thoughts and feelings on it. So before like kind of, going into the meat of that, I do want to briefly go into my little packaging corner and presentation corner over here. So if you don't care for this, you're stuck. But if the listeners want to skip this, please just feel free to go, skip the chapter on this. But I care, so I'm going to talk about it. This is one of my favorite presented records in my collection, period. The packaging on this, every single thing in it is thick and heavy. It's a thick boy. It's damn boy, he's thick.
Is it like, it's almost like the big like Snapfish books we get with photos you kind of print out. Is it like that type of thick, would you say?
Snap? Oh, like a photo book.
Yeah, like those.
It's actually, you know what? Honestly, yes. Like one of those, like, you'd order maybe like a 20 or 25, 28, maybe 30 page picture book. Like there's many different online providers that will do this for you. It's honestly about as thick as that. This single LP that I'm holding in my hand, it is absolutely massive. It actually, is it like, it's not half an inch, but it's way more than a quarter of an inch looking at it now. I have trouble getting it into its sleeve. It is a monster. The vinyl itself is a 180 gram vinyl, and it is some of the heaviest, like it is at the heavier side of that. They're not skimping on you. The cardstock used is super thick. Like you're not like holding this thing and it sat on one corner and it sags on the other. Everything's super rigid because it's all like super thick quality materials. It feels valuable. The package feels valuable. So it is one of my favorite pressings in my entire collection by far because of just how premium everything feels. Before going into talking about the design, I do want to briefly shout out one of my favorite apps of all time. It's Albums on iOS. Albums. They recently released a brand new feature that I think it's called like credits or something like that, where when you are in your now playing view, your player view, you can kind of swipe to the right and you'll see a really nice table of all different kinds of credits associated to the record. That could be things like design credits, the mixer, the master,
interesting.
Players, the bandmates themselves or the player themselves. So it's so great. What makes it even better than just like the liner notes you'll see on like a CD or an LP, or just like the metadata of your MP3s, is that they're all linked, which is really nice. So I can look here and see that the designer, the art direction for this album was headed by Ben Wilkerson Tousley. I could tap that and I could see that, no joke, this guy has done a lot of my favorite record designs, actually.
Really?
So
Which ones has he done as well?
So he has done literally every Grizzly Bear design up to this point. Like the art direction, he always either is heading or plays a big part in. So I would say that's a big part in why every Grizzly Bear record, in terms of presentation, seems very clear that it is like one of the same. Like, yes, this is a Grizzly Bear record. It's all him, kind of leading that
even
effort.
Yellow House, because I mean, I could definitely see Vegetamist, B-sides, and Shields all kind of have that sharp edges, kind of oil drab painting. They use the spade and club stylization, so I could definitely see those as all being the same family.
Yeah, and to be clear, he's not like the artist behind the art pieces for Vegetamist and Shields. Shields, that's actually an art piece called Blue Club by Richard Diebenkorn. I'm pretty sure I'm saying that incorrectly, but I'm trying my best. That's like an art piece that existed for a while, and I think actually same with the art pieces for Vegetamist. But
okay.
He's the one that kind of leads the direction, I'd assume, of like choosing those art pieces,
right?
Like what to accentuate. But also he has done Crack Up, Fleet Foxes. He was the art direction behind that, so that's pretty exciting. So he's been around. He's done some pretty good work in the past. So it's kind of nice to see another work of his. I think the art direction on Shields is as good as it is because he's the one leading it. I like his work a lot. And then I'm going to dive into a bit of like the mixing and mastering, continuing down on album's credits web here. The mixers, Michael H. Brar and Ryan Gilligan, they have mixed a lot of Coldplay's stuff, like Coldplay's X and Y, they both did. Milo Zalado and Michael actually did, of all things, he was the mixer behind Young the Giant's debut self-titled, which is pretty exciting. So, kind of an all-star cast here. And in fact, the master, Bob Ludwig. Yeah, Ludwig? Again, apologies for the pronunciations here, but his mastering work, he's done a lot of Coldplay ones, Viva La Vida, Death and All His Friends. He's also done, get this, The Last Bison's Inheritance. He was the master on that. Rainbows, or Radioheads and Rainbows. Mumford & Sons, Sigh No More, and then one of my favorite records from 2020, Phoebe Bridgers' Punisher. He was the master on that too. So like really an all-star cast here. I'd say that all these folks here, based on their previous work, which I also really, really enjoy the way these other things sound, I think that's part and parcel why Shield sounds as good as it is. Like we have a lot of great hands here working on this. And of course, Chris of Grizzly Bear himself is the one that is the producer of the record as usual. So,
That's really fascinating.
Yeah, no, definitely. So shout out to Albums again for one hell of a feature. It's a lot of fun to explore around. So before we go into the song by song breakdown, I do have one last thing that I want to mention, and that's kind of like, I guess my Syracuse style opening statement. What is this, like 20 minutes in, 40 minutes into our recording?
Yeah.
Where I have my opening statement. But just in general, the way that I like to perceive Shields, not just by itself, but with regards to Grizzly Bear as a band and its overall place in the discography. So if you look on, like, let's say, Wikipedia, you'll read a bunch of blurbs from the bandmates themselves talking about how going into this recording for this record and writing for this record, that they were like mentally, emotionally, physically drained. They were exhausted from their Vegetamist tour. They really do not sound into it, like music as a whole anymore. Like it sounds like they just need a job. Really long vacation. They do not sound happy in those blurbs. Now, granted, like I'm sure like most musicians post-tour aren't necessarily in the best state of minds, but that kind of just keep that in the back of your mind that they're drained. They are not at their peak energy capacity at the moment. Going into from a tonal perspective, from like analytical perspective, Vegetamist deals a lot with relationships, as does Shields. Romantic relationships, and Vegetamist has this naivete to it, this optimism, this like we can make it work, this can-do-ness to it, wanting the relationships to work. And Vegetamist, it's rife with problems. That's kind of Grizzly Bear's forte. They love writing about things that are going bad. You're not going to hear a Grizzly Bear song and have it be like, wow, this relationship's going great. That's not what Grizzly Bear does. But Vegetamist, it's from the framing of like maybe it's someone's first relationship. They're wanting it to work. They're maybe to a fault. Maybe it's abusive, but they're trying, and it's really, that's like the core to it. And it's this fear that it's not going to work out. There's a desperateness to Vegetamist to have this relationship last. And it comes to a head in Vegetamist in the penultimate track, where it's just like, we tried, we'll do what we can, you'll do what you can, like, you brought us this far, we'll do what we can to make this last, like that sort of mentality to it. Then going into this, it's like the emotions are dead. Most of the songs here are, again, relating to relationships, and not great relationships. It's not going well, but it almost feels like a natural progression of the problems that were kind of explored in relationships in Vegetamist, where at its natural conclusion, this is what's going to happen, where it's just, there's this sort of dead space. The characters explored here, they're tired, they're aged, and they just don't care anymore. Or worse, they're like a nervous wreck, almost like a PTSD over these relationships. And like for Gunshy, it's damn near abusive, emotionally abusive. The idea is explored there. So it's very easy to kind of see the through line here between like Vegetamist and Shields, where Shields has this maturity to it, and it's not a good thing. It's a purgatory. It's a really sad state of affairs there. So you were talking before, I think, about that Yellow House is kind of doldrum. I actually think Shields emotionally is kind of doldrum, because there's nothing happening here. These relationships are a facade at this point, being explored here. And I think that's in part, as I mentioned before, due to the touring here. I think a lot of the lines here, even explicit lyrics here, could be, with the framing of that they were not really in a great state of mind looking at this, like, man, they're really kind of done with this, aren't they? Or they really just want a break. And I can't help but hear that ending line for the last track, so bright, so long, I'm never coming back, and been like, was the intention that this was going to be potentially their last release, like their last official release here? Because there was a long gap between this and Painted Ruins, like years and years and years. Like what? This was released in 2012, and Painted Ruins was like what, 2019, 18 maybe? Like way later. So I think it's reasonable to think that this could have been the last release, given how long a break they had, and with such sentiment as that, so bright, so long, I'm never coming back, and all these feelings of like, the relationship is dead and just wanting it to end already. Let me be free, kind of expressed throughout this entire record. I can't help but look at it through that framing. But then also it still works in the context of previous releases and the songs themselves, where it feels like this is the natural conclusion of the ideas explored in Vegetamist. So, from both a meta and a literal perspective, I think Shields works amazingly when viewed in context of Vegetamist and, of course, the band itself. So I truly love how well Shields does with regards to how relevant it is in both regards there.
No, it's very interesting. That's a very good point. I did catch on some lines here. Again, I didn't do too much reading into the backstory of the band, but I did catch some lyrics here that did kind of give the sense of kind of what you're saying, and sense of exhaustion, or just kind of, just like, I don't care anymore. Like some of the lyrics, like in Speaking Rounds, like step down, just once learn how to be alone. And a couple of other lyrics I caught throughout that, where just, you kind of get the sense that you're just kind of done, or you're kind of fed up with it. I bet like it's kind of like I get the sense of maybe like cutting one's losses in a relationship, where I feel like that probably hits with a lot of people in COVID right now, where it's kind of like, well, do I be alone, or do I go through this because the alternative is worse? Like, because I can't imagine with lockdowns and quarantines, the whole dating scene is awful right now. But I did catch that feeling, that emotional kind of defeatedness or exhaustion of kind of giving up. And I think that kind of plays into why I think this is kind of more of a fall, early winter feel to it, because it does kind of have that emotional feeling. Like you don't get a lot of the warm fuzzies, I guess, from this album. It kind of leaves you still a little bit more on the sad side, I think.
Yeah.
Even though the instrumentals, I think, are engaging and keep keep it upbeat in a sense.
So at this point, I'm ready to go. I need to start talking about individual songs here.
So before we jump to that, I got like one last call out for the album as a whole that I want to talk about, or for the band as a whole. I think one of the things that works really well here is the vocal duality of Dan and Ed as the primary vocalists. They are great compliments to each other. They have songs in this album that are both Dan-led and Ed-led, and then they have songs where they alternate or switch between the two in the same song. And it wasn't until you had pointed it out to me that I recognized that there were two singers here. I honestly, when I first was listening to this album, like way back when you sent it to me, I thought it was the same singer. And I think that works really well. It's not jarring where you're switching to another singer and it's completely different. It's like, oh, we're over here. Kind of like on like Real Estate where they have that one What's His Face song in every album where it's like, oh, here's this guy again.
It's
like,
this guy again.
Yeah. Right? So it blends very well where it's very easy for me to see as like Dan is kind of the singer, say, regular voice. And then maybe when it's something more emotional or sad and melancholy, they kind of hams it up and turns into Ed voice. Like that's kind of where I could definitely see this had been one person. And I think that really works well because I think that really provides compliments to each other and the harmonies they have in this album, where a lot of it kind of builds kind of like a classic Crosby, Stills, and Nash where they build up to a nice vocal harmony conclusion. Like they have moments in this record that kind of harken back to that. And I think that works well because Dan and Ed, I think, have voices that are great compliments to each other. They don't collide. They meld very well.
Yeah. I'm very glad you brought up the dream team between Daniel and Ed, because I think it goes even beyond, and I agree that like from a singing perspective, they complement each other extraordinarily well. And to your point, like I didn't even realize at first for Yellow House. I did realize for Shields that there were different singers, but I didn't realize for Yellow House that there was two different people. Like it sounded very much of the same, just kind of different inflections to me. And to me, that was a good thing because it made the songs feel cohesive as opposed to, I'm glad you brought it up, the Real Estate one where it's always like, oh, and now for something completely different. This guy.
Yeah, this guy.
Nothing against this guy.
The Token song.
Yes, the token song. Yes, you don't get this here. It's very natural having these two swap back and forth. It's very McCartney-Lennon in terms of that. It's they work very well together. But deeper than that, I think even just the songwriting styles of both of them is so different. And as you mentioned, there's like Ed-centric songs and Daniel-centric songs. And then there's ones where they kind of both really work together or kind of pass it back and forth between them where you can kind of notice almost the distinct sections between. I feel like Daniel led this part or Ed led this part. And I think the duality between them on the songwriting perspective is what makes just not only Shields as great as it is, but just Grizzly Bear's work as a whole as great as it is, because you get such great variety. You get the thrilling elation of Daniel's strumming where there's very brisk guitar work going on for his stuff a lot of the time. His work almost, it sounds happy, but then when you listen to the actual material of the songs, it tends to be very grim. So you almost get like this kind of chaotic energy to it. Whereas Ed, you do get more subdued, more somber notes generally, but that kind of works well together. It's like a salty sweet combination where you have the more laid back kind of seeping molasses of Ed's work combined with like the pop rocks that is Daniel's side of the stuff. So like the two combined really work well together in a way that you wouldn't. It's like a sour and sweet or a salty sweet. It's great.
Yeah, I 100% agree. That's a good point on the duality too in terms of even the songwriting. I agree. It's a good combination. And I think that's what kind of makes the pacing work well in this album is you do have the Adelmas, you do have the Hunts, the What's Wrong to kind of break things up from kind of more of, I guess, the kind of the sleeping Utes of the album where you're having more like you're describing the brisk, like crisp chords that can kind of progress. And it's kind of a little bit more Dan-centric writing.
So speaking of Dan-centric, though, we got to talk about the opener. Dan always leads the openers for these things, it seems like. So, yep, this is no exception. Sleeping Ute, Daniel Rosen all the way through. And boy, howdy, what a great opener. I think this is the one that really made me realize that I liked Grizzly Bear's work and I really wanted to pursue this. Because I remember listening to Yellow House and being like, puzzled by it, not confused by it necessarily, more perplexed. I guess that's all kind of the same thing. But the confusion isn't meant to be framed in a negative way. It's more of that I couldn't make heads or tails of it, really. It was kind of like a 4D object, or I was playing it through it in my head, these sounds, and being like, I can't quite make ends of this. Like, I think I like this, but I can't quite understand this. I can't really wrap my hand around it. But Sleeping Ute, it's very grippable. You can hold on to this melody and it'll carry you all the way through, and it's driving and thriving, and there's so much going on here. And I gotta talk about the drums too. There's reversed drums on this, and they also apply like some kind of compression to them as well, different than like the rest of the instruments going on at that time. And it's almost like the guitars, or the drums rather, are like inhaling sharply, where and then exploding in all different kinds of places. It's almost like fireworks of drums. It's insane. These wandering dreams of the North Road, dressed
Speaking of fireworks, I think there's an actual firecracker sample they just throw in the background.
I really hope that's true. I wouldn't doubt it. I didn't pick it out if there is one, but I wouldn't doubt it. There's a lot of really cool things going on with the guitar, or I keep saying guitars, a lot of really cool things going on with the drums in this.
Yes, it does sound like, now you bring it back, towards the end, it does sound like they kind of reverse and the drums are inhaling, right? Whether that be they just take the sample and just play it backwards, or it's just clever drumming where you just kind of do what you do kind of in reverse and reverse the tempo up. It's like a sharp inhale, to your point. That's actually a really good point. And that's one of the notes I had, is I love how the song kind of keeps going very heavy throughout, and then it strips back for a nice instrumental close.
Oh yeah, it's so good
at the end. And again, like I said, I jumped in preparation from this, from Yellow House straight to this.
Ooh,
so a lot of my first comments reflect to that, where it's, what a way to start an album. I can hear the lyrics.
I agree there.
And just like kind of a breath of fresh air. Like it sucks you in right away. And it's almost, you still have some directed music chaos kind of going on in the background here. There's a lot going on. Like, for example, the firecracker sample that I think I'm convinced I'm going to try to find the timestamp and show you that I do believe they just literally threw in a firecracker sample into this. But yeah, I really liked just the feeling of this song entering you into the album. It's the simplistic comments I have on it. It was a breath of fresh air. And I think an ideal of what I think Grizzly Bear is capable of, and what I think I would love to see more of, is stuff like this.
100% agree. It's a classic Grizzly Bear tune at this point, I would say, where it's up there with On a Neck on a Spit, up there with Southern Point, all that good stuff. And something I do want to note here is this is actually a very unique song in the lineup. There's not many songs on the record that's like this, tonally and instrumentally. It's very unique.
I think the one that's most similar to it is probably Yet Again. It's probably the most comparable, I would say.
Yes, maybe. But from this point on, I feel like the record as a whole sort of dampens itself down a little bit. There's loud songs after this, like Yet Again does have like a really good driving rhythm and song structure to it, but I don't feel things really open back up, or it opens up, but it's bare. I feel like things start to settle back down and you're stuck in this long, empty void, and there's things that happen there, but it doesn't quite reach that elation again until the end of the record. And I feel that's purposeful, where the material in the songs start getting into like, I need to learn how to be alone, and the exhaustion and defeat with regards to the relationships being, or situations even in some cases just being discussed on the tracks following this. I feel like along with that subject change, the instrumentation and the soundscape kind of dwindles back down and being more of a purposeful, as you mentioned before, but like bare sort of set, and then it explodes back into color and life again at the very end. And I feel that's purposeful, where when that subject matter changes, it kind of accompanies this tonal change instrumentally. I don't know if you see this at all, or if I'm talking on my butt here.
No, I agree to an extent in terms of the variety of, like, we don't have the mix of directed music chaos that Sleeping Ute has throughout the album, to your point. Like, nothing's quite as, like, bombastic as it, I would say. But I would say Speak in Rounds, Yet Again, I think those kind of carry that energy, but I agree that it does dwindle. We do kind of get a little bit more of kind of a downturn and then spikes back up with Sun in Your Eyes.
Yeah. I think that's a good description about like the directed chaos, where there is a lot of stuff happening. It's not like it suddenly gets boring. There's a lot of good embellishments there in Speak in Rounds and like Yet Again, but that chaos doesn't return until the end. So yeah, good point.
Yeah, and something I actually do like, and I'm going to kind of hopscotch around here, but kind of back to the end, because we were talking about the bookends and kind of how the flow of the album goes. What I like is that before just jumping right into and almost doing a repeat of Sleeping Ute, Sun in Your Eyes starts as very intimate. Like, I don't know what they're doing necessarily with the mixing. They got the sampling of kind of a piano bench and kind of the wooden cover of the piano to start. You really feel like you're there with Sun in Your Eyes. And then it builds up to that big bombastic finish. And I think that's the way to do it. It's not jarring. It's not like you're getting whiplash after Halfgate or Gunshy. Like, it's leading you into it. And I think that's what's important, is that while we do kind of have that decrease, it's not like a discontinuous jump. It's now you're smoothing back into it.
Yeah, I 100% agree. So the next track, Speak in Rounds, I love the driving beat here. Lots of energy, and what my favorite part, I think, in the entire track is those flute embellishments that whiz by. Like, you're looking out the window and you just see these people like flutes as they're flying right past. It's so great to hear. It almost feels like you're flying at some points. But again, not with as much chaos energy as the Sleeping Ute had. It's slightly more controlled and purposeful than that. So this is the sort of start of that. But Speak in Rounds is one of my favorite tracks on here because of those flute embellishments and how driving the song is.
Make another
Yes, I agree. Like I said, the three to start the album that I love, Sleeping Ute, Speak in Rounds, to Yet Again. I want more of those in this album, to be 100% honest.
Yes.
What's sad to see is I was on Genius for looking through the lyrics, and it's actually really cool because Ed and Dan actually have verified comments on some of the songs where they talk about some of them in the lyrics. Because I know in Genius you can highlight and then anyone can comment and everything like that. So what's interesting about Yet Again that made me really sad that there wasn't more of this is he said that Chris Bear and I went to Mexico for a month. It was in Baja, this cute little cheap place. There was no one else around, no cell reception. We were focused on doing stuff. We wrote 10 songs and we were stoked. Then we brought it to the other two guys and they were like, we're not understanding what you're going for here. This isn't really our vibe. We were deflated. The only song from Mexico sessions that made it was Yet Again. So I'm like, no. I'm like, what are you doing? I'm like, give me more of that. Like, that's what I think those are the songs where I think they really shine. Like, I wanted to know what else comes from those sessions they had down in Mexico during that trip. Like, I'm curious to know now is if Yet Again came from the batch and that's the one to survive, like, what else was left in there that was on the chopping block for this album?
So, I mean, I'm pretty sure that's all, or majority of it is available on that Shields B-side release. I'm pretty sure that's where all of that met its public release, though, of course, in some reduced capacity, because I'm sure it wasn't like re-recorded. I think it's mostly the demos that they had. I could be wrong. I don't actually listen to. I haven't actually listened to Shield's B-sides, frankly, but like Smothering Green Smothering Green, Taken Down, Listen and Wait. I'm pretty sure those were all from that session that they had. Have you listened to Shield's B-sides?
I have not. No, I would have to give it a re-listen, and I could be 100% wrong. Maybe the rest of the ones from the sessions really weren't worthy of going on Shields, but I like to be hopeful that there's more yet agains in there or something similar to the energy of the song.
I'm gonna need a follow up on this then. I'm gonna be I'm curious what your thoughts are then on your homework then. I guess
Yes.
Is that stuff any good? Find out.
I will give my candid opinion.
So I gotta talk about the pothole of the record. I truly dislike The Hunt. I think it is the worst track that Grizzly Bear has ever done. Yes, even worse than Colorado. I will say it. The Hunt.
I don't buy
The Hunt
that,
is a
no.
dirge. I cannot stand The Hunt.
So here's my reasoning. I said The Hunt in my notes it's a more traditional Yellow Housey vibe song.
No.
And I said, I think this vibe now fits into this album because it's surrounded by other strong pillars that it makes some of that more Yellow Housey vibe tolerable. So like I thought it fit well because again, it breaks up the pacing. So I viewed it as harmless and in service of the pacing where it just kind of like I listened to it. It was certainly no Plans. It was certainly no Marla, and it was certainly no Colorado in my mind. I thought the execution was better done. And of course the production was better done. So I think you're doing undue judgment onto The Hunt because I think it's serving a purpose, and I think it does better than what similar songs in Yellow House had done before.
Oh, I disagree so hard because you're right. It breaks up the pacing. That's the reason I hate it. There's so much momentum going into this, and usually when you have quieter or more laid back tunes in a track list, it is kind of hard to keep that momentum going. But great records still do it for those songs where it naturally flows back down and segues back up into a next peak. But this isn't a nice steady curve. This is a pit. And where I would agree that it is kind of like those dirges from Yellow House, let's say like Colorado, like Marla, I would say to Yellow House's betterment, there's other things going on in the track. So even though the song itself isn't spectacular, there's things there to keep you interested. That you can kind of poke around in the bed of instrumentation for something to keep your mind on. But for The Hunt, it's just the track, and that is kind of Shield's thing, where it is more focused on the songwriting, the songs themselves, and less of gratuitous instrumentation, like in Yellow House and even most of Vegetamist, I would say. But when you have a song like Colorado and you take away the lush instrumentation, what's left? There's nothing there. It's so bad.
Yeah, I could see that. I think though it's elevated by its proximity to other good things, and I didn't view it as disrupting the pace as much as I think you did. I think because the other three songs were so energetic that it's good to have a little bit of air and a little bit of time to just breathe before you kind of continue through.
I do agree that a slower song was needed at this point, but we needed a better one than this.
Agree to disagree. I think this one, like I said, because in my mind, what sets it above is I couldn't ever get past the more traditional, yes, even if they had the lush instrumentations, the doldrum just mumble blah of the vocal delivery where it's like, do you even care? Like, just distracted me so much from everything else that like I didn't care enough to pay attention to the instrumentation, where it served as a distraction, where now at least I can hear the lyrics where it's like, okay, this is just more of a stripped back song. I can take this.
That's fair. If you don't really like the vocal deliveries of Yellow House overall, then Marla and like Colorado are really not going to be doing anything for you.
It doesn't. I don't like that type of stylization. It just doesn't do it for me. It feels lazy. It feels like you're hiding something that maybe isn't that great. Say lyrics with just covering it up with poor mixing and production, labeling it as artsy. I
didn't realize we were talking about Painted Bruins.
Or it's not Painted Ruins.
I'm kidding. That was a bad joke poking fun at Painted Ruins, which I have problems with. I don't think Painted Ruins is very good. I like Painted Ruins, but it has many, many problems. But yes, no, I'm sorry for interrupting for my lame joke. I do agree. If that is a problem point for disliking that vocal delivery. Vocal deliveries are a hard thing to get over. Case in point, Phoenix's TMO or whatever the hell that release is called.
Yeah, it's exactly. I can't like. Ultimately, a song in my mind has to initially engage auditory senses, and then like the lyrics naturally come second. Like for me, it's never lyrics first; it's always auditory. And so if there's something jarring like that, where it's like I can't get past it, it's very hard for me then to start enjoying the rest of the stuff. Where in Yellow House, it was the vocal deliveries that caught me in terms of how it listens, that distracted me from listening to the other instrumentations, the other auditory experience. Whereas at least The Hunt, in my mind, it's not, to your point, amazing. It's not any of the other songs previous in this record, but it does no like tangible harm. So it's kind of like a wash in my mind. It just kind of, I think it's fine. I think it gives us a nice break. It doesn't insult my ears with some mumble jumble. It keeps us going. I think all things said and told, I don't have an issue for it. It's not a long one. I mean, there are some longer songs. It's only 3:45. Could it have been more of an Eldelma at like a minute? Okay, maybe. But at least it wasn't a 7-minute song in your eyes.
Yeah. To your point, it's Colorado had no business being as long as it was. So at the very least, we're spared that. We're spared a 10-minute.
I'm just glad we can agree on that. I'm just glad we can at least agree on that.
Yeah, I can't sign off on Colorado's song length. I can't do it. A simple answer is kind of interesting to me because I don't like it, but it's perplexing. It is a slog. It's a dirge, but it's got a little hop in its step.
No, I think what works with this song, I actually really like this one. What works for me here is, again, I think to your point, like instrumentally, it doesn't do anything like crazy. It's kind of, to your point, kind of like, okay, not a whole lot there. But it shines in, the vocal duality really shines in this song, as I really love how Dan and Ed play off each other when it comes to the chorus. And ultimately, I do like the lyrics in this one, where they kind of poke fun at cynical viewpoints and kind of show how it kind of breaks down on its own extremist weight. Like if someone is just a cynic about everything. So it's like, okay, there's no wrong or right. Like just do whatever you like, I guess. Like it, I don't know. I like the lyrics. I like the vocal duality between the two. I think the song shines in that respect. And this one I like. I think it makes up for, say, what it doesn't do instrumentally for, I think, what it makes up for vocally between the two, driving through the chorus.
When all you hope is that everything great, no wrong, no right, just do
The vocals don't really do anything for me on this personally, but as I said before, like I find it intriguing, and I think the reason I don't outright dislike this one is because it follows The Hunt, and I think literally anything could have followed The Hunt and I would have liked it because it was not The Hunt. So I guess point credit to you, a simple answer, I don't hate you because you follow The Hunt. So that's a ringing endorsement there. But thankfully, I actually do quite like What's Wrong. It is a slower
I do too.
song again, but we finally have some meat on the bones here for instrumentation because it's been really bare for Hunt and Simple Answer. So we get something here, which is nice. They got like these little finger cymbals going on throughout the entire track, which is really nice. It kind of gives it a little tinny heartbeat throughout the song, which is pretty nice. And I almost feel like this is something that could play in a really bougie, smoky downtown cafe in the dead of night. Like that sort of vibe is going on here, and it's I have always kind of quite liked this one because of that.
I want more trumpet, Mark.
I do want more trumpet too. Yes.
You made it clear earlier in this podcast. It's like, I heard this in this song. I'm like, did like a face plant. I'm like, where was this? Why are you only doing like literally a 30-second take of the trumpet? And it's like, okay, we're going to shove that in the corner and never touch that again. Like, there's so much potential there. I think it works really well with their sound. So the trumpet can cover a wide range of feelings and tones. It could be kind of more drawn out notes. It could be crisper. It can be jazzier. It can be snappier. It could fit more perhaps like a sleepy mute. It could also fit these longer, more kind of somber songs, the more quieter songs. It's like, give me more.
Yeah, the cynic in me thinks that's a practicality of the touring economy for musicians.
I think it was a guest artists they had come on. I don't think Ed and Dan played the trumpet, which is unfortunate.
I think Chris plays the flutes and things, so that's why you see flutes appear and like clarinets, I think, and a few other instruments. That's why they're so plentiful, generally speaking, in Grizzly Bear songs. But you don't see instruments like this pop up because, as far as I'm aware, none of the guys play it. So if they had more prominent and frequent features, then that means they'd be playing a lot more trumpet samples over the speakers when they're playing live, which, that's always kind of crappy to kind of have something that's clearly, that's just playing over the speakers, and then the guys here are playing something else. Like, you do what you have to, but in general, it's not great to have a lot of that and be like, well, you're basically just singing over a karaoke version of your music. And of course, that's the extreme example. I'm not saying that a few trumpet samples here or there would really, contribute greatly to that effect. But I think that was the mentality there, is that like, well, we're not going to have a trumpet player with us, like ranking them around while we're on tour. So we'll have it like maybe in a song, maybe to appear for a few, seconds, where if we can get a trumpet player to pop by real quick and play it for like a special one-off performance, then, hey, that's great. And then, if we can't, then it, it won't cause much harm. But yeah, I would have loved to see it.
I agree, because I think I love Vacationer, but I don't know if I would do a live performance again. I probably would do it. I just think they have greater potential to be better live, because a lot of Vacationer's stuff relies heavily on samples, because Kenny is more of a bass player and the band is kind of more of your standard band setup, but they rely on a lot of these samples that kind of come out of nowhere. Especially for, say, Relief, where it'd be kind of really interesting to start getting more of, you get like a Coral Reefer band to meet up with Kenny. Jimmy Buff and the Coral Reefers to meet up with Kenny, because they have more of that. You get kind of more of the bongo drums. You get more of the what's it called? I'm missing the name of the instrument.
Steel drum?
You get steel drum, you get all those other kind of more tropical sounds that I think could complement Relief well, whereas when they played it live, a lot of it more was just samples. To your point, you just kind of play the sample as you're playing. It's like, no, okay, that's kind of sad.
And I like Vacationer live, but I see what you're saying. And I feel like for Vacationer, you know what you're getting, where it's sample-driven music, for the most part, honestly. But for Grizzly Bear, I think, you don't necessarily go in expecting a lot of samples. You're expecting more of live performances. So, it's not really conducive to their aesthetic. Yeah, but I agree.
For Gunshy and Halfgate, I'll be honest, I really didn't anything to say on these.
Oh.
These just kind of washed over me, and I just was like, all right, get me to the end track, because the end track's awesome.
Oh no, I need to talk about these. I can't believe this. Hearsay. I love Gun Shy. It's just playing in the pocket of those that offbeat throughout the whole song, and as I mentioned before, this is like full-blown emotional abuse, where like this person is really having a hard time, really wants to get out of this relationship, but they feel emotionally trapped into it, and they even say at one point that their trapper smiles as they struggle. Like, oh man, what imagery here. It's honestly kind of grotesque, but the song itself, it almost gives you a bit of anxiety how much it's playing in that the offbeats, and every once in a while that kind of melancholy guitar comes in with that little riff again, kind of tying all the different pieces together.
The sky keeps staring at me, frozen in my tracks. Nothing else to see. And when I move my face left, you're always standing there.
With those guitars floating in and out, and with the little, I think the little cymbals come back again for this, it feels almost like an ethereal thing, like this trapper is almost like a phantom, a ghoul of some sort. It almost works like a Halloween kind of song in that regard. It's just, oh man, it's a delightful song for me in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate it. I like it. It's just like, I just didn't really have anything really to say to it. Because a lot of the lyrics here, there wasn't a whole lot that jumped out to me. It was more of a couple of lines or so. Some of it I find to be a little bit more cryptic, where you feel like you have to be knowing more of what the songwriters were thinking. It's not as on the surface. Say, as we're like a Father John Misty, it's like, you know what you're getting a Father John Misty. You can talk and dive into the lyrics and chew them over.
Yeah.
Whereas this, it's like, yeah, I'm like, I was like, I didn't really have anything really to say about it. I'm like,
that is more of Grizzly Bear's MO overall. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of the songwriting is obtuse, even in their recent stuff. And let alone Yellow House. Good Lord. Talk about obtuse.
Yeah. So I do like the lead in though of these to Sun in Your Eyes.
Yeah.
So there's nothing bad I have to say about them. These, I think, are in service to the album. They keep it going. I don't think they detract from anything. But there's certainly no tent poles in my mind of the album.
To your point, I don't have a lot to say about Halfgate. I really enjoy this one as the penultimate track. But I do want to call attention to, again, kind of talking about the pacing and the overall structure of the album. I think this really brings things back home, where this goes back to what I was saying before about the Shields having overall good pacing, and overall is a very well constructed record, because this calls back to the beginning of the record. The first, like, I would say real track of the record in terms of setting the tone is Speaking Rounds, and there the question frequently asked and repeated many times is, could I be alone? Could I do this? And then the rest of the record explores feelings of entrapment and uncertainty and anxiety with regards to relationships, and when you feel trapped by them, basically, and not being able to leave them, and is particularly in cases like Gun Shy where they're abusive, and in others where it's just neither party is really into it anymore. And that comes back with Halfgate. It actually closes the book on that, where Halfgate, they do repeat that mantra. Actually, it's an answer this time. Content to be alone. I'm content to be alone, to draw this quiet picture every night, just to remind me why I'm here. Like, there's a resolution there, a resolution to that question posed, where no, I am content to be alone. It's time. And I think that tonal resolution, that arc that's now closed, leads into Sun in Your Eyes so perfectly. Because Sun in Your Eyes is that escape. I feel like Sun in Your Eyes,
it's that
when it
journey.
Begins. Yes,
it is
exactly.
That journey.
Yeah, and Sun in Your Eyes is both the end and the beginning of that journey. It's the end of this abusive relationship structure that's explored throughout this record, and the beginning of something new. And it almost feels like they're crawling out of a deep hole, like all this imagery of crawling on the ground, your hands grasping at dirt as you're pulling yourself up, and you're sunburned and you're sweating, but you have like this determination in your eyes, the sun's in your eyes. And that's when, for the first time in the record, you get that cacophony, that lush instrumentation that Grizzly Bear was always known so much for and loved in Yellow House and Vectimist. It comes back again, and it opens back up. It's like the veil has been lifted from the narrator's eyes, and they see the world and their life for what it really is, and it's full of potential, and it's going to be hard, and it's going to suck. But they have this long, never-ending road ahead of them, and they have this determination so bright, so long, I'm never coming back. Like, there's no greater defining solution than, like, I know what I'm doing, so bright, so long, I'm never coming back. Which is great, especially considering, like, how much waffling is in Vectimist, because Vectimist, as I said before, it has this naivete to it with regards to relationships, and a lot of the narration in Vectimist is about like, oh, I don't know, I hope I'm doing the right thing, I hope I can make this work, we'll do our best, we'll try, we can do it. And this, it's no, I'm never coming back as the ending solution here. Like, pretty damning stuff.
I like the resolve kind of communicated in this, to your point. The goals are very straightforward. It has a nice kind of journey feel to it. Like I said, it feels very epic. It has a nice kind of theatrical imagery associated to it. Just what a way to close the album. I agree. This is a great instrumental callback to kind of the stuff that we had withheld from us after Sleeping Ute, where it's more lush. It's more of that standard, like you're saying, Grizzly Bear, I guess, full bombastic capability. Just that's how you close an album. Yeah.
It is a massive track too. It takes up the entire last side of the second disc. You flip it over, and there's Sun in Your Eyes. That's it. That's the last side is Sun in Your Eyes. That's it. And it's amazing. I remember listening to this with Jay, an old roommate of mine and from my college days. And it was my first time listening to a record on a record player, actually, which is pretty fun. We both just sat in his room and listened to this thing front to back. And I remember him flipping it over, and I was like, is this song taken? Is that the whole side? Just one song? So yeah, I remember just being completely blown away by how the movements in this, it builds and falls back and builds and fall back. It's like waves almost. And
yes,
it's the closer to the film. That's the only way I can say it. It feels cinematic.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it runs a nice brisk 7 minutes. So,
oh, that's all.
No, yeah, but that's the way it end and wrap up the bow on this album for sure.
Yeah. So at this point, I think we've talked this thing to death. All I have to say is, like, final thoughts overall. I love this record. This is the last great Grizzly Bear record, in my opinion. Painted Ruins doesn't hold a candle to it, in my opinion. I think Shields, Vectimist, and Yellow House all kind of form this holy trilogy of Grizzly Bear records, where they all are so great in their own special way. And I like to think Shields overall successfully combines the great ideas explored in Yellow House and Vectimist, where Vectimist is more really brought structure to, like, structured songwriting to their style, and Yellow House was just the style. And I think Shields has come the closest that the band has gotten to fully melding them into one cohesive smack, you know?
Yeah, I do stand by that. I think this is the ideal of a Grizzly Bear album. Like this, if someone wants and is curious to get into Grizzly Bear, I think obviously this is most digestible, this is most accessible. But I also think that this is where I think they get all the elements more or less right, and they execute them correctly. To your point, that takes from all the other two in the trilogy. Granted, we talked about some of the downsides to what it doesn't do so well, but I think it takes lessons from those other two albums, kind of smashes it together, and I think overall, though, it does everything better. And I do think this is kind of the ideal Grizzly Bear. This is always the one I go back to if I listen to them. I don't revisit Yellow House. I don't revisit Vectimist. Because with Ecotomist, I can never really get past Dory.
Oh, don't do this to me.
But Shields, I view as this is the ideal.
I would agree. I would say that I think the biggest criticism I have of the record overall, setting aside the pothole of pacing, I could say that a criticism of this might be that it's a jack of all trades, a master of none, where when I really want to dive into lushness and like core Grizzly Bearness, I don't necessarily seek Shields out. I go to Yellow House. When I really want structure, I still actually don't go to Shields. I go to Vegetomist. So it's very rare that I'm in the mood to really kind of hear them together in the way that they are presented on Shield. And it's not to say I don't really enjoy the record when I listen to it. I do really enjoy it, but it's just because it's in that middling ground, it's that kind of happy medium, I tend to not seek it out because I tend to go towards the extremes when I'm really feeling something Grizzly Bear. And that's just my own personal style. To your point, like, I'm sure there are many people out there that would hear either Vegetomist or Yellow House and be turned off for one way or another. But for Shields, I think they'd have the best chance of coming away happy and satisfied from. And it might be kind of the gate into their other work as kind of like a stepping stone.
Yeah, that's actually kind of my problem with Yellow House and Vegetomist, is that I agree. I think Shields is a little bit more normalized, I think. Or like Vegetomist and Yellow House have these peaks, but it doesn't have the depth. Where I think Shields has consistency, where I agree it misses out some of the more kind of key Grizzly Bear-y kind of, I guess, like the 2 weeks or the easier Central or Remote, those kind of songs of Grizzly Bear kind of is missing some of those stylizations. But I think it does stay true to them, still give you a little taste of that, but it actually has the depth where I don't ever feel like there's a point in this album where I'm like struggling to keep it on and I don't want to walk away, where I think that is always my issue with playing Vegetomist and Yellow House, is that there's always a certain point in those albums where it's difficult for me to get past certain aspects, where it's much easier for me to just pivot to something else.
So that's it. That's Shields in a nutshell. Michael, thank you for being on with us today.
Yeah, no, it was good fun. I'm glad to be back here doing this. And yeah, it was fun talking about this. I hadn't visited Grizzly Bear in a very, very long time. So it was fun going back and listening to kind of their discography to prep for this.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all for listening. Everything we mentioned in terms of lyrics or external links will be noted in the show notes. If you don't know where the show notes are, you can typically find them in your podcast player of choice, but not all podcast players support show notes, unfortunately. So you can actually find them on our website, badmusichurts.com. That's badmusichurts.com, like the car company Hertz or Hurts Like It Hurts Me. Either one works. And thank you for listening. Until next time, see you later.
So replaying The Last of Us Part 2, huh?
Yes, and I am enjoying it immensely. I'm flying through it. I am acutely aware of, I did New Game Plus, so Hard Plus, so I got all my upgrades and shit, which I like.
Yeah.
Ammo, I have none, which I don't like. I had to, is that fucking gas station where you arrive and then people scripted like arrive after you.
Right.
So it's like first day of Seattle in that like wide open, like kind of downtowny suburban area before you get to the skyscrapers. Yeah, there's a gas station there. And as far as I can tell, the wolves do not drop in until after you go into the building. And like 30 seconds later, that's when they arrive. And I remember getting jumped in my first playthrough because I was at the bench and Dina was like, yo, on your right, what you doing? You're right there. Which is really fun because you think like, oh, I'm crafting. This is a safe space. nah, bitch.
Yeah.
People are gonna drop on your ass. So that's pretty exciting. But so like I had no ammo, so I literally had to craft mines and place mines at the entrances of the building and like at various points. So I just sat there in the bathroom while I hear boom. What was that? Spread out. Boom! What was that? We're under attack! And I'm like literally just crouched in the bathroom, like, yes, I have no gun, so if you find me, I am dead. But you have to go through approximately 4 mines to get there. So like eventually I hear the doom. Like everything's safe. I just go out there, pick up the remains, and carried on. So it's been fun.
That's hilarious. Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. When I redid it, I didn't do the plus, but I may actually do that because that does sound like a lot of fun, keeping all your upgrades through the replay.
Yeah, I will say that now, like, I am fully upgraded on all of the weapons I have right now and the health stuff. So there's less of an incentive and less of a joy of finding the medicine and finding the tech gears when you find them. So that's something I noticed, but at the same time, like, I need to remind myself, like, I kind of already did that. I like just exploring the environment for exploring's sake. So, like, and, like, I like all my upgrades and shit. Like, I don't want to have to start back all the way from square one. So, I think it's a reasonable, Yeah,
that's good. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I caught some more aspects of the story. I explored more and found new places I had missed.
Same.
Yeah, it was good fun. It was good fun. Plus, I always beat Owen with the toy bow and arrow. He never stands a chance.
I haven't gotten there yet. I did beat him my first playthrough. I can take losing to the kids, even though it hurts.
Yes.
I'll take losing to the kids. I'm not going to let Owen beat me. I'm not going to let what's-her-face's piece of shit score stand. Like, no. No, sir. That can't be.
Yeah. On the second playthrough, too, I caught more of the relationship between Abby and Lev. And I actually enjoy it a lot more the second time through, where the first time through, I was still going through the Ellie withdrawal of like,
yes,
why am I not playing as Ellie anymore?
Why no Ellie?
Yeah, so like, I really enjoyed paying closer attention and catching the details. Like, it just goes to show, like, why was the gamer community so badly triggered that, oh, they're doing a trans character in it? To be 100% honest, I didn't even notice the first time I played through that Lev was trans. It went completely over my head.
That was like one of the major things. That was totally why he was ostracized.
I thought it was more of just him cutting his hair and it being a tradition thing. I didn't know it was because I didn't catch the whole gender thing and the Lily thing my first time through, but it was fun replaying and be like, oh, okay, like, it's there, but it's not like in your face. Like, it's very naturally explained and everything like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's not like you meet Lev and he's like, don't ask me about my tragic backstory. Like, no, it's revealed naturally. He's not like meeting this girl and then immediately telling her his life story. Like, no, like, it's kind of just picked up when it becomes knowledge that needs to be known. Like, oh shit, like, they're actually hunting us, and I think I know why. Like, that sort of shit.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Also, I loved replaying it, going through the mansion place when you go back to try to find Abby down at the beach. It's like the last encounter of the game. Oh. I had so much fun going through that again, knowing what I was getting into. Ellie, like... I had so many exploding arrows, and I just had such a fucking great time just being Ellie Rambo through the place.
It really is. It is the most Rambo that Ellie gets the chance to be throughout the entire series, which is great.
It's so much fun. I love that encounter because it continues and you progress through it's not just like this one and done. It's like this continual thing. It's there's levels to it. You're sneaking into the base and then you're like releasing the clickers and things to sow chaos, and then eventually you're in, and then it is more of like just gauntlet style. Like, there's people all around you and it's hard to sneak. Like, eventually you're kind of just gonna get caught, and the best you could do is just whittle as many guys as you can before you have to go Rambo. Like, yeah, there's levels to the approach, which is nice. Oh, it was so much fun because the first time through, I had a real struggle getting through that counter, and this time through, I just like played them like a fiddle. It was so much fun.
Yeah, knowing how far you have to go and like remembering the general layout helps a lot for that.
Yeah, it really does. And it was so much fun just like staying on top of it and just keep you like one step ahead of them. But it was fun too, because like the first, like, I noticed a lot of my replays, like if I got caught and I wasn't happy with it, I just restarted the encounter, because I always like just like had a lot of fun trying to perfect how I wanted to do things in my playstyle.
I'm the similar way. I am very restart happy this time, where it's like before I was very much like role playing, getting the cinematic of it, but this time it's like, no, I want to like min max this. Like I want to get this encounter right, like that sort of stuff.
Exactly.
Whereas like that can kind of mess with the flow when you're playing the first time, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, but I did that for when you first sneak in and you meet the first like clicker that's chained up and they're like teasing it or whatever. I did that one many times, and I finally realized like, oh right, I have exploding arrows. So I'm sitting there, right when I get there, craft one pop, they're like, what's that? Then junk, and it's like they all go bye-bye. I'm like, done.
God, exploding arrows are actually amazing. They're amazing. That's one of the things I love about carrying the skill set through. So I can craft so many arrows very quickly, which is nice. So
yeah.
Oh yeah, no, one of the things I started doing was again going back to like that kind of suburban downtown city area before the skyscrapers. There was a bookstore that was overrun with clickers. And then like a bunch of people just camping, a bunch of wolves camping in like, what was it, the bookstore or whatever across the street or whatever. It's like right before you get to the TV station area.
Yeah,
like
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And the first time I just silently took out all the clickers, and then I tried taking out terribly everyone that was camping. But then I realized this time, like, open the door, throw a bottle, run, hide, and then they just attacked each other in like this like all three clickers out of there came running out, and everyone's like, ah, which is great. So I'm just sitting there like, yes, good, in my hidey hole bathroom while everyone's killing each other. So I have enjoyed discovering ways to take people down that I didn't even realize I could do the first time around.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I really like how, again, I really liked replaying it because I know what the story beats are. So I was actually really happy to play as Abby again when we did the switch.
Yes.
Like, I actually really like a lot of the encounters with Abby.
Me too.
And I really like how they harken back to, like, you get the duality of the experience of Abby running to the emergency room, and it's like those different, like the different dreams that she has of going back there. I don't know. I thought that was always really well done. It was a lot of fun replaying it and kind of knowing what to expect so you can concentrate more on the details.
Yeah, it's definitely been a fun spot the past couple days for me.